I want epidural, please, right now. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. For those of you who have followed me for a while, you guys know that I've recently given birth to a beautiful baby girl. However, I've never really shared my birthing story yet. Now that I've reached the finishing line of the so-called 4th trimester, I'm finally ready to share my entire labor process as a memory for myself and as a takeaway for those who are expecting or planning for a baby. To summarize, I've had a really positive experience about the entire pregnancy and the labor process, which I can't complain. So today, let me talk about the timeline of my labor process and what really happened on the day of the labor. And also, if I can, I will share some tips for you to have a smooth delivery. So first of all, let me share a few words on my hospital selection. I live in Southwest London, so I did a separate referral to Chelsea and Westminster Hospital. That hospital is in central London, so it's supposed to have seen a lot of cases, especially complications. Because of its reputation, and some of my friends did the maternity care there, and they all have very good experience about it. And also, when I checked out online about the feedback from other moms, it seems that everyone has had a good experience about that hospital. So that's why I went with Chelsea and Westminster. And then moving on to the birth plan, because I am in the low risk group, which is below 35 years old and had a natural conception, and also I don't have any underlying health problems. So planned C-section was always not an option for me, and I know that I always wanted to aim for a natural birth. However, unlike the planned C-section, natural birth has really a lot of unpredictable factors, because you really can't plan when are you going into labor, and you can't plan what happened during the labor process. You will probably be asked to make a lot of decisions on the spot, which can be quite stressful for those who haven't done their homework yet. So let me go through my story and explain what really happened. According to the hospital, my due date was the 3rd of January 2022, and during my pregnancy, I have put on quite a lot of weight, even though it was still within the healthy range, but I have a massive belly. People who have seen me during my pregnancy have always said that probably I would just give birth earlier because I have a massive belly, but my mom always said that, oh, I think you will give birth on the day of the due date. So that can tell you that due date is really not a due date, it is for guidance only. Some people give birth earlier and some people give birth past due, which is my case. So nothing really happened until 1 week later. The policy at my hospital was they wouldn't let anyone to carry on the pregnancy for too long, which is 42 weeks. So they even have booked me an induction at 41 plus 5 days, which is 14th of January. However, I didn't end up being induced because on the morning of the 10th, which was a Monday, I started to have mild bleeding. So I went to the hospital to do my normal checkup, and the midwife said that it was still very early in the entire labor process, so they asked me to go back home and continue monitoring. On our way back home, we bought pineapple and Indian meals because it is said that these are the things that can accelerate your labor process. However, who knows? I don't know whether it is the pineapple that helped me or not. But for the rest of the day, everything seemed to be very quiet. I had some pain, but those pains are very mild. Nothing really happened until that night. I remember in the middle of the night when I went up to go to the toilet, I can feel there were really mild contractions, but these are very irregular, and it didn't last long. The contractions were bearable until the following afternoon, which was the Tuesday, 11th of January. Then everything just started to ramp up. I did a hot bath to help with the pain from the contraction. Apparently it helped, but only when you are in the early stage of the labor. I was using an app to record all my contractions just to make it easier for me to monitor, but the contractions were still very irregular. The intervals can be 15 minutes or 20 minutes, and nothing lasted very long. But in the evening, I started to be in much more pain, and I couldn't stand up, and I didn't want to eat at all. And my husband and I were like, okay, this is probably the night that we need to go to the hospital. So we did a final check on everything that we are going to take to the hospital and take everything down onto the ground floor, and just to get ourselves prepared for that moment. And at about 9 o'clock in the evening, we decided to go to bed earlier because we know that we will need a lot of energy for the labor. However, for me, I just couldn't sleep at all. For those of you who have experienced giving birth, you know what I meant by contraction. It is a kind of pain that no words can describe it correctly, accurately, unless you've been through it by yourself. I can only remember that I was telling my husband again and again that my bottom half is detaching from my entire body. You just feel that you are being stretched, but then nothing can help. Deep breath can't help, stand up can't help, and lying down can't help. Lying down was probably the worst position ever. So I always needed to get up from the bed and go to the hallway to use the handrail of our staircase to support myself when the contraction came. And also at some point I just threw up everything I ate for dinner, even though I didn't eat much at all. Apparently that was quite normal because another friend of mine also threw up everything she ate before going into labor. And at about midnight, we called up the hospital again. My husband did the call. However, they do need to talk to me because only by talking to me and hearing how I speak and how I breathe, the hospital can tell whether I am ready to go to the hospital or not. So at the time when we called the hospital, my contraction interval became very short. It was about 5 minutes apart and each contraction would last more than 1 minute. And then the hospital said, okay, you can come to the hospital either now or you wait 1 hour. So here is the thing. In the UK, if you don't go for the private service, the standard for the hospital to admit you is you have to be 4 centimeters dilated at the time you arrive at the hospital. So to play it on the safe side, we waited until 1 a.m. in the morning to go to the hospital. I can still recall the pain. I was in so much pain. You guys know that we live in a terraced house, and it took me almost 20 minutes to walk from my house to my car. And we parked our car just outside of our house because the contractions just came and the interval was only 2 to 3 minutes, and the only way I can walk is to wait for the contraction to be over and use that 2 to 3 minutes to walk. So that's why it took me forever to walk to our car. And thank God we had to go to the hospital in the middle of the night when there was literally no traffic, and it only took us 15 to 20 minutes to drive to Chelsea and Westminster. And then after we arrived at the hospital, everything was taken very good care of by the midwives and the labor ward. So they did the checkup on me and they confirmed I was 4 centimeters dilated at the time. I was so happy because I didn't have to go back home. And then the midwife asked me, okay, now what do you want? And I just said straight out of my mouth, I want epidural, please, right now. I just knew that epidural was always an option for me. So here is the other risk of going for public service for maternity care. You can't really book an anesthetist for your epidural injection because it's just the way how the public system works. You have to see what options are available on the day. In my case, I was again super lucky. So in my hospital, in the labor ward, there was one anesthetist who was engaged in another cesarean session at the time, so he couldn't help me. However, there was one anesthetist from the ICU department who was available, and he came over to help me with epidural. I think I only waited for 20 minutes before I got injected. I did hear a lot of stories that people ended up waiting for hours before they can have the epidural, which sadly can be the case for anyone. In my case, I just got super lucky that there was one available who can help me right away. And after the epidural injection, the world became beautiful again. I can finally think and talk normally, and in the meanwhile of waiting for further dilation, I can chat with my husband and the midwife who is helping me. I mean, I want to say that epidural is probably one of the best inventions ever in the entire human civilization. I don't know why people don't want to have epidural for labor. Just go for it. There's no reason to reject it at all. You can really save a lot of effort for the real push. However, if there's one negative point about epidural which could possibly stop me from using it, is it can slow down your contraction and your dilation, which was my case. So at 2 a.m. I got injected, and then we waited for the entire night until 7 a.m. in the morning when they did the checkup for me, and I was not dilated at all. I was still at 4 centimeter dilation, and I was quite frustrated. After the entire night of waiting, there's literally nothing happened. So the midwives and doctors, they have to do something to help me with further dilation. And then I got injected with hormone and they broke my water at 7 a.m. in the morning. And they say we have to wait for another 4 to 5 hours before they can do another checkup on me and see if I got fully dilated. So if I cannot be dilated, I need to go to C-section because that's the only way left to take the baby out. I mean, the wait was not fun, but there's nothing else I can do but just waiting. At 12:40, when the midwife did the checkup on me again, she confirmed that I was fully dilated and my contractions was very strong. So at the time, I was ready for push. And then my midwife said, okay, I'll give you 1 hour to rest and get prepared for the push. During this 1 hour, she passed me a lot of tips and really tried her best to show me how should I do the push correctly. You guys have to remember that because I was on epidural, which means I can't feel anything down there. So what I have to do with the push is really try my best to push to the best of I can with imagination. I wouldn't lie, that was quite hard because that was my first birth. I didn't have any experience of pushing, and on top of that, I have to imagine to push hard. So what I did is I recalled the bootcamp sessions that I did with my husband before I was pregnant, and there was a coach who was really pushy and energetic, and that helped me to recall all the uphill treadmills and heavy liftings that we've done. With the help of that in my mind, I push so hard, I give off everything. In total, I did 5 pushes, and at the 5th push, I was about to ask my midwife how many more pushes will I need to do, because I really have zero energy left with me. But before I asked her, the midwife helped me to drag my daughter out of me. By the time I realized my baby is already on me doing the skin to skin with the umbilical cord still attached. So we started the push process at 1:40 p.m. in the afternoon, and my daughter was born at 2:01 p.m. So it only took me 21 minutes to do the push, which was super quick, and I was very happy with the process because I heard people push for hours and they ended up having a cesarean session to take the baby out. So from that perspective, I can't be more grateful about what I have gone through. Because I gave birth during COVID at my hospital, I can have one person to accompany me for the entire process, which was my husband, of course, because we didn't have any family members living with us. I didn't really see the process of how my daughter was born, but my husband did, which I think was the best memory to us too. And later he described me about the process. So the head was out first, of course, and then one of her hand was attached to her face, and that hand was out the second, and then followed by her arm, her shoulder and body, and then all out. Even now, I think of that day when my daughter was born, I still feel very emotional because I just couldn't believe the power of human nature, curating life and giving birth to someone who we fall in love instantly without any condition. So that was my birth story, 100% real. It was indeed a very positive experience. However, I do believe that was a consequence of a combination of several factors. For example, my personal health condition, the hospital, luck, and everything. I don't believe there are any tips to have a natural birth and a speedy push because there are loads of things that you just can't control. So what we can do to help ourselves is to make sure that you are on top of things that you can control. For example, what are the options you have if there's any emergency? What medication that you want to use and what are the pros and cons attached to it? Make sure you understand those before the big day. In addition, exercise during pregnancy. Just don't stop exercising because of pregnancy, because exercise in general is good for our body health. But most importantly, I think it is to have an open mind, which means as long as we can give birth safely and our baby arrives healthy, either it is through a natural birth or a cesarean section, epidural or not, is really not too much of a problem. Thanks for staying to the very end of the video with me. I hope you enjoy listening to my birth story. If you do, please don't forget to give me a thumb up and consider to subscribe to my channel and turn on the notification bell to stay connected. Okay, I upload video every Friday at 7 p.m. so I will see you guys next week. Bye bye!